On the one side were the triumph of foolishness, incredulity, darkness, and despair, as against the apparent defeat of wisdom, belief, hope on one side. This afternoon, beyond the pales of 19th century Europe, I want to submit to you that the apparent triumph of evil over good, haughtiness over humility, greed over generosity, injustice over justice, suffering over salvation is still a reality that haunts us by day and haunts us by night. I invite you to strap on your mental boots and stride with me across the corridors of the 20th century, where our eyes can easily and effortlessly sight the 3-month powerless infant sexually abused by the tall, muscular, shameless man who is foolishly intoxicated with the wine of his sordid pleasures. And even beyond this, who can forget the horrors of World Wars I and II? Who can forget the countless number of innocent women, helpless children, and men whose blood muddied the cobalt streets in the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia? Who can forget the wailing of freedom fighters in apartheid South Africa, strangers in their own homeland? Who can forget Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge regime in Cambodia between 75 and 79? We scan in vain across a whole century to find the triumph of good, but what do we find? A sordid and morbid triumph of barbarity over civility, darkness and foolishness against the light of reason and the glow of wisdom. Triumph of darkness all around. Let's glide beyond the horrors of this century, further into the devastating pandemic, the Black Plague, which scoured through the landscape of medieval Europe and sent thousands into an unmarked grave. Let's swiftly sprint further into the horizon, to the very presence of the 1st century BC, into a tiny country, Israel, sandwiched between the continents of Africa, Asia, and Europe. Let's drive closely into the dark recesses of one fateful weekend, somewhere nestled within the spring corridors of AD 31, where the greatest showdown and duel between good and evil was fought in the busiest and most significant weekend the world has ever known. The worst of times in the history of a lonely man on a relentless mission to salvage a dying world, where his acts of kindness, mercy, and humility were perceived and received as the very height of foolishness. I am not privy to all the nitty-gritties of his case, but as I watch from a distance, I can conclude all at once that this man is being condemned and tortured unfairly. I was sure it was the worst of times for this man. You tell me, how do I know that that Friday was the worst of times? Why wouldn't I know it was the worst of times? Tell me what it is. When in Jewish jurisprudence, a matter that was deemed possible to culminate in a death sentence was legally supposed to be tried between the hours of the morning and evening sacrifice, but not today. Today, this man is being tried outside the confines of this stipulated time. Maybe I'm confused, but I hope not. In the Jewish legal system, the jury was the defendant at the same time. There was no need for a lawyer. If this day wasn't the worst of times, tell me what then it is. When the high priest himself, the very embodiment of justice, had plotted the demise of this man, even before the court convened. Tell me what it is. Why do I say that that Friday was a season of darkness? Why wouldn't I say it was a season of darkness? Tell me what it is. When Pilate demanded to know why they had brought him before him, the only compelling reason they could give was, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him to you. How do I still believe it was an epoch of incredulity? Why would I doubt it was an epoch of incredulity? Tell me what it is. When like Julius Caesar, who on the Ides of March BC 44, turning from the face of death for refuge in his trusted friend Brutus, only received the deadly dagger that sent him to his grave. This man, at the time he needed comfort and human support, was betrayed. Somehow we may manage to understand why Judas sold and betrayed him with the keys. But we know it was an epoch of incredulity when Peter, his closer confidant, had to learn curse words in order to prove that he had no affinity to him. How could you explain why John, the disciple within the very bosom of his master, deserted him at a time when his master was craving for just an iota of human solace, the day all human comfort took wings and fled? But even beyond all these intrigues, my pen suddenly becomes inert, my hands freeze, and my train of thoughts abruptly becomes fossilized and petrified as I try to comprehend the ultimate trial of this innocent God-man before the Roman procurator Pontius Pilatus. John records an inclusio that surprises and staggers my imagination. Now turn with me to the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verses 38, 19, 4, and 6, where we read, Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, "I find no fault in him at all." Pilate went out again and said to them, "Behold, I am bringing him out to you, that you may know that I find no fault in him at all." Therefore, the third time, when the chief priests and officers saw him, they cried out, "Crucify, crucify." Pilate said to them once again, the third time, "You take him and crucify, for I find no fault in him at all." Third time. Pilate needs to be commended for his honesty in the examination of the prisoner. 3 times he pursues and probes and peeps into the very inner being of the prisoner to find in the Greek word hiatein a logical cause, a motive, a crime, or a fault. And 3 times he concludes, "I find no fault in him." I find no fault in him. It's not even good enough to portray the underlying Greek oudemia, which is a compound word consisting of the strong negation ou, the adversative particle there, and the word highest or mia, meaning one. In other words, Pilate was saying, "But notwithstanding all my investigations, I do not find even one whit of fault in him, not at all." But wait a minute. My mouth gapes wide and almost drops saliva. My voice chokes for words, and I stand flabbergasted at what follows this verdict. "I find no fault in him at all," says Pilate. Yet, in 19 verses 1, Pilate took Jesus and scourged him. To say that he was whipped or flogged is unfair. It's an underestimation. Roman floggings were known to be terribly brutal. They usually consisted of 39 lashes, but frequently were a lot more than that, depending on the mood of the soldier applying the blows. The soldiers would use a whip of braided leather tongues with metal balls woven into them. When the whip would strike the flesh, these balls would cause deep bruises or contusions, which would break open with further blows. And the whip had pieces of sharp bones as well embedded in them. The back would be so shredded that part of the spine was sometimes exposed by the deep, deep cut. I find no fault in him, not at all, yet subject him to these horrible terrors, the triumph of evil. I don't want to linger around the detail that the Roman spikes, 5 to 7 inches long and tapered to a sharp point, were driven through the wrist, not the palm, the wrists. Pause a moment and take a mental flight into this dark tunnel of horror. The nails will go through the place where the median nerves run. This is the largest nerve coming out of the hand. And the nail will sever and crush this nerve. Do you know the kind of pain you feel when you bang your elbow and hit your funny bone? It's extremely painful when you accidentally hit it. The pain was absolutely unbearable. A new word had to be coined, excruciating, just to describe the pain that comes out of the cross. Excruciating, out of the cross. If this wasn't the worst of times, if this wasn't the season of darkness, tell me what else could it be? When human beings were defiantly gazing at the cross, hurling stingy words of insults and mockery on the Son of God, the Son bowed down and refused to look upon its maker. The forces of evil pressed their murderous rage to the very limit where the life of humanity could no longer thrive, where the very verve and vim and vitality of the life giver fickled out like a flame. The worst of times. The devil was happy. Jesus was committed to the custody of Hades. But he forgot. The devil forgot that Sunday was coming. He forgot that Sunday was dawning. He forgot that Friday will be over, like the furious freedom fighters in the French Revolution who stormed the Bastille on the morning of July 14th, 1789, to liberate its inmates. On that fateful Sunday morning, the angel of the Lord descended. The soldiers were alert. The entrance of the tomb was firmly locked, and Hades, king of the nether world, had its captive in his firm grasp. But as the angel came closer and closer, the soldiers gave up the fight. They left guarding the entrance of the tomb. His brightness sent them berserk, and they went bananas. As the angel came closer and closer, at a touch, the stone flipped away. The last bastion, Hades, was yet to be conquered. Jesus shouted, the angel shouted, Jesus, thy Father calleth thee. Hades becomes immobilized, helpless, powerless, nerveless, gives up his captive and takes to his heels. Jesus emerges from the tomb. I check the calendar and I recognize it's no longer Friday. Hear me. It's no longer Friday. Friday is over. It's Sunday morning. Jesus glances around to address Hades. But alas, Hades has fled. He is on the run, on his tiptoe. Nevertheless, Jesus addressed him in his absence. Oh, death, where is thy sting? Oh, Hades, where is thy victory? Hades, be it known unto you today that I am the resurrection and the life. Then Jesus turned to a world battling with sin and suffering, a world engaged in a hand-to-hand mortal combat against poverty, pain, disease, wars within, wars without, a world where evil now seems to triumph over good, and declared with immaculate voice, I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of Hades and of death. I remember reading a story about a guy who met his friend after they had parted for 11 years in Budapest. His friend had lost his memory, and he couldn't remember anything for the past 11 years. And he disclosed to his friend that they called that medical condition FOME, free of all memory. FOME, I like it. Free of all memory. Today may be your worst of times. I know somewhere you are going through Friday. The worst of times, your marriage is hemorrhaging, your family is in shambles, and you are at a dead end not knowing what to do with your wayward child. Friday, but remember, Friday lasts for a moment. Sunday is coming when you shall be free of all these memories. FOME. Friday is coming. Today may be an age of foolishness. Perhaps somebody here is questioning himself or herself. Did I ever make a right decision to leave my vocation to pursue MDiv? I am drowning in the rising tide of bills, school fees. I am sinking in a financial quandary. Yes, you may be battling poverty, privation, but remember, it is still Friday. Sunday is coming when we shall not only see the wisdom of God in his dealings with our present realities. Friday will be over. Sunday is coming when the curtain between the seen and the unseen will be lifted, and we shall be free of all these apparent memories. Foam. Maybe today marks an epoch of incredulity. In your mind, you think it is incredible and unbelievable. So do I. You question yourself, why would the Lord allow this intractable, painful cancer, diabetes, asthma to batter and wrench and squeeze the very life of my loved ones? You look into the eyes of your loved ones expecting to see life, but your nose smells from afar the unwelcome stench of death in their presence. You watch your loved ones shrink inch by inch till their very bones have no cartilage for a covering. You literally watch their downward flight from the ruddy height of health to the pale valley of mortality. But hold on, don't give up. Remember, Friday is a season of darkness. Friday is the winter of despair. Friday is the day of the crucifix, but it is only apparent. Mark the word apparent. Apparent triumph. Sunday is coming when God shall not only restore all these healthy ones, but we shall be free of all these memories. Foam. Sunday is coming. In the face of the apparent triumph of the Wednesdays, foolishness, darkness, incredulity, remember that sooner than our soonest expectation, Sunday is coming. Hold on to this thought. Sunday is coming. Repeat yourself when you are on the verge of despair. Sunday is coming. Sunday is coming. Let this be your light when you are walking through the veil of darkness and despair. When tears begin to well up in your eyes, kindle the thought that Sunday is coming. When at last, God will not only wipe away your tears from your eyes, he will scrape off all the nasty memories of Friday. And maybe going through the worst of times, God's providence may look foolish today. The future may be shrouded in thick darkness at this moment. In despair, all around me may point to Friday, but I know that as surely as spring follows winter, as certainly as streams run downhill, and as definitely as dawn follows the darkness of the night, Sunday is coming when at last we shall be free of all Friday's unpleasant memories. Sunday is coming when goodness shall triumph ultimately, and we shall be free of all the memories of Friday. Sunday is coming. Form.